Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back to Cannon Fodder, the channel for Arsenal fans all over this world. I've got to apologise for being late. Yeah, a little bit late. We're watching Joe Biden's he's been sworn in. 46, number 46 and counting. Yeah. Eltel, welcome back, man.
Oh man, I'm like you. I've been quite overwhelmed by Biden's speech, by all the ex-presidents that turned up, and it was great to see Barack Obama, Michelle Obama there. All showing solidarity, and of course, a bit like the guy who we're getting rid of. So somebody was
Lads, limber up, limber up. Anyway, yeah, I like how it's kind of alluded to. We're going to be talking about a certain player who's is now an ex-Arsenal player, and I've got some other bits and pieces of news I want to talk about as well. So we're going to see you on this other side of this music intro, guys. Limber up, limber up. Yes. Welcome back indeed to Cannon Fodder, the channel for Arsenal fans all over this world. Yes. Yeah, Wednesday evening, we reached the halfway point. Thank goodness, Tel. It's been a long week. It's been a challenging week, Tel. But we'll talk about that once we're off here. God, dearie me. Anyway, make sure you subscribe to Cannon Fodder and hit the bell notification button so you can receive all the latest news right here. And we're going to get right into it. Like I said, there's a couple of bits and pieces that I want to get into, newsworthy bits and pieces. Just actually, whilst I was at work, I got a couple of notifications in regards to Socrates Papastathopoulos, and apparently Arsenal have ended his contract with us. And listen, I put a tweet out and I say, Socrates, thank you for your services. You fought well, and you kind of showed a lot of respect for what we were trying to do. You're very, very professional, and I just wish you all the best in the future wherever you end up going. But Elto, you anything to say about Socrates
Yeah,
Papastathopoulos?
I mean, my son works with somebody who sort of knows him very well. And the day after we lost 4-1 to Chelsea in Baku in the European final, he was obviously back in England, and he phoned this person up and said, "Would you fancy a coffee?" So she went and met him up at the back of Oxford Circus, and they went into a little coffee house there, and he was distraught. He just needed friends around him. The man was really distraught, and you can see that in him. He's a regular guy. He's never let Arsenal down. Unfortunately, we had him in the twilight of his career. He played for Klopp back in his Dortmund days, I think it was, and but he stepped into the breach when Arsenal needed an experienced centre back, and he never let us down. So I'd like to wish him all the best in his next venture. But he never let us down, and he was a
Yeah,
true stalwart. So top man,
yeah.
absolutely.
And like for me, an old style defender. It's just like, he was quite limited in his ability, but I mean, I can't fault him for what he did. What he did. So
Well,
yeah,
I was in Athens a couple of years ago, and I was chatting to someone, and we mentioned his surname, which is pretty difficult, so I can't pronounce it. If you can, apparently, a lot of people who have very long surnames in Greece are from the Peloponnese, which is where Sparta is. And of course, anybody who knows their ancient history knows that the Spartans were taught never to give in, never to submit,
yeah,
which is why the Spartans didn't take part in wrestling in the ancient Olympic Games, because you have to
yeah,
at some point in a wrestling match say I submit, because the guy has you pinned down, and the Spartans
mm,
wouldn't do that. And there was something about that in him. He was a real Spartan. He never gave up, he never gave in, and he always gave his best. So top man. He was a great reflection on his country, and people of Greece should be very proud of him.
yeah. Well, we're proud of him anyway.
Yeah,
The other bit
yeah.
of news I want to talk about contract extensions. Arsenal have offered two contract extensions to one of which is you can see on the screen, Emma Smith Rowe. The other one was actually Bukayo Saka. But there's also a chap, he's a goalkeeper. Get his name now.
Hilson. Hilson.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. So
Yeah.
yeah, apparently also offered these two youngsters a contract extension. I just don't want Arsenal to be silly and give away, over inflated contracts to players who've still got a lot of way to go to prove their worth at Arsenal. It's got to be in relation with and like matching their ability and what they've produced so far. It wouldn't make any sense to be giving a youngster so much money in a contract extension there. But I think Emerson Rowe, he's done wonders for us, Eltel. Bukayo
Yeah.
Saka has done wonders for us. So it's deserving to give these guys a contract extension. Why not? Why not indeed, Tel?
Yeah, I mean, most of us work in jobs where we have competency procedures and you have annual targets to sort of hit. And anybody who's doing any job and doesn't just want to sit on their haunches should be up and running with it and quite happily absorb any new targets. And so both players totally deserved it. And they you get the feeling they're there to sort of make a name for themselves and to be top quality professionals. It's not all about money. One thing I'd like to say about Emile Smith Rowe, which I didn't mention before, and I did mean to, I noticed in the first half against Crystal Palace, so we're going back 2 games now. He's a lovely player. I don't even know if he realises he's kind of doing it, but what he does is he kind of hides in little spots in between the lines, which is what all good number 10s do. And he was in so many good spaces, and Arsenal didn't find him. They didn't find the ball to send through to him. And he plays one touch, and if they a few times they did find him, he played the lovely one touch stuff, and off Arsenal went on a good tack. And so it's interesting that he was in the spaces. I could see it, but the players weren't looking for him. And it's interesting in the second half of that match, he became a lot more static. And I think they'd spoken about it at half time. And their immediate answer was, look, we can't train now. You're going out in 10 minutes. So try and hide, not exactly hide, but try and be more static so people know where you are so they can feed the ball through to you. And the reason I say that is because it was so noticeable in the second half. He kind of stood in places where they couldn't miss him. But of course, that's not the point of a number 10. They've got to be able to drift around. And I
Yeah.
think between the Crystal Palace match and the second Newcastle match, I think they've worked a lot on getting the ball to him, which means you've got to be looking for him. Look up, see where he is. Now, occasionally the ball would come to him, but not often. And his only option was to play it backwards. But it didn't happen often. And normally he was in a space where they could play. And then he does this lovely first touch stuff. And over the years, we've had a few good one-touch players, and he's definitely, as he said in the interview afterwards, he's already thinking where if the ball comes to him, he's going to be playing the ball. If you look at Fabregas, he was a wonderful player at that because he'd constantly scan left and right, and when the ball came to him, he knew exactly where he was going to play the ball. And Smith Rowe said exactly the same. He said, "I know where I want to play the ball before it even comes to me." So, and that bodes well. And although we call him a number 10 and number 10 is not fashionable now, I think he's a new style number 10 because he does track back. He does do an awful lot
Yeah.
of the graft. And I think James Morrison was saying for Leicester in an interview last night that unless you do the dirty stuff and run the hard yards, then Brendan Rodgers won't keep you at Leicester. And I've seen Emile Smith Rowe doing that, running back, tackling back, doing the hard yards. So if you like, he's a new style number 10 who is prepared to work back and support the two back lines, the back line and the sort of midfield line. So absolutely, I am a little bit worried at the back of my mind that he has been injury prone in the past, and he does tend to run around with his socks down by his ankles, which is always a bit of a worry. But hopefully, unlike Jack Wilshere, he doesn't seem to run the ball into trouble. I always felt with Wilshere that he had wonderful close control, but he used to keep the ball and run into trouble. And then if anybody mistimed the tackle, they'd whack him in the ankle. So, but Emile Smith Rowe doesn't seem to do that. He seems to be aware. And your favourite, Liam Brady, was exactly like that. Wonderful
Yeah.
player. close control. But when people came to him, he'd jump over the sort of tackle. He could see the tackle coming, see where it was going, and he used to do this little gentle leap over the tackle and then carry on. And that is a real skill, because unfortunately for Arsenal fans, we've seen some wonderful players whose careers have been cut short because they've got wonderful first touch and wonderful control. I think of Abu Dhabi. But of course, as soon as people start clattering into guys like that, if the ball is by their feet and by their ankle, they are going to end up with serious sort of calf and leg injuries and ankle injuries. So Emil Smith Rowe, absolutely. Somewhere I read they're playing 40,000 a week, which compared to what a lot of the other players are playing, are being paid, isn't a great deal. But I think he's got Arsenal in his heart. His dad's a good friend of Ian Wright. They're all big Arsenal fans. So yeah, and Bukayo Saka. I mean, there seems to be anywhere we play him. Well, at the moment he's an inverted right winger. He started off as a sort of a left full back, left wing back, and then he became a left winger. He's also played a couple of times for us in that centre sort of number 10 spot, and now he's an inverted winger. So there isn't anywhere the guy can't play. He'd probably do, apart from being a bit short, he'd probably be a good goalkeeper.
Probably need to have a tryout in the goal.
Yeah. Funny enough, talking about goalkeepers and height, James Hilson, unless he's grown a bit, he's actually 6'0", and Inaki, of course, being about 5'8", seems to sort of rate these guys. And obviously, he's with the way goalkeepers play now, they have to be good with the ball at their feet. And I do hope Hilson keeps going. And I think I told you I have an ex-pupil of mine who was about 5'10" by the time he'd reached 10 or 11. And the club signed him on, and although his parents were quite short, his uncles were 6'5" and 6'6". But unfortunately, a year or two ago, they let him go because they'd measured his progress in height, and he was unlikely to attain those big sort of be that tall. So I don't know. This was before Inaki came in, and Inaki, of course, came from Brentford. Where apparently there's a guy there called, is it David? His surname is, and he's their goalkeeper, and he's also 6 foot. So it's the return of the small goalkeepers, by the sounds of it.
But just going back to Emil Smith Rowe, his first touch, Terry, he's predominantly right-footed, isn't he? I watched him, in the Newcastle game. I was thinking he appears to take or receive the ball with his left foot, and I'm thinking,
yeah.
Oh my goodness!
I've rarely seen that skill in a player. He can take it with the outside of his left foot and play it in, so he doesn't break stride, and he plays it with his weaker foot on the outside into his stronger foot. How do you
the hell?
At breakneck speed? I mean, this guy runs. When he runs, he goes vertically for the goal. The ball comes to him, and he seems to control it and be aware of everybody around him. This is a top player in the making.
But also, we need to protect him. We've got to protect him. Both him and Saka, both 19, 20.
Yeah.
In a man's game, I think. Sorry, Tel, go on.
I do kind of worry that we are overplaying some of these players. I mean, Tierney especially. What are we doing to the poor fella? I mean, he's dynamite. We all know that. He's one of our best buys in the last decade. But we are overplaying him. And I hope that Arteta is thinking, well, look, I've got to give him a rest from time to time. I think people are saying he might play Saka there at some point. But Saka, and it's a pity we don't have any young left full backs coming through that already. So unless he wants to play, someone else there that we haven't thought of, or whether he's going to try and get a player in on loan to take up the sort of slack. But we can't keep playing Tierney match after match. And of course, when he came to us, I think Celtic had overplayed him, and he had a few injuries. So I think Arteta must be aware of that, and hopefully between now and the end of the transfer window, we'll get someone in just between now and the end of the season to take a little bit of stress from Tierney also. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So those were the new segments. Just a couple of segments there, and yeah, I guess we're going to be talking about the the player who's going to be named. Yeah, Mesut Ozil has now left these shores of Arsenal and has made his way to Fenerbahce. And before I get into the little, nuts and bolts, there's not too many nuts and bolts on this one here, but all I'm going to say is I'm going to wish Mesut Ozil and his family all the best in his new endeavours, playing out back there in Turkey for Fenerbahce. That's what I'm going to say. Now, he came to Arsenal in 2013. At that time, he was a record signing. And Tara, I remember where I was. I was like, I just like rented a room in a friend's house, and we were there watching the TV. Well, he's now an ex-friend. He was also an Arsenal supporter and Turkish descent. And we saw the press conference there, and we're thinking, wow, Arsenal appear to have landed on their feet with this guy who came from Real Madrid. Yeah, £42.7 million for the ex-Real Madrid, and it was international, German international. And I thought, right, we're going to be going places. And
Yeah.
I can't think which game or which games, what other games where he took and controlled the game by the scruff of his neck. I can't think of two. Which game did he actually dominate and control the game?
It's difficult to think. I can remember his goal against Ludogorets, which was
that's the one that everyone comes up with.
Yeah, and there were a few games where he flashed brightly, but only for a period of time. Do you know what happened? I think the whole game moved around under his feet, and suddenly not only was the number 10 not fashionable, because who cares about fashions, but the way teams set up was all about speed, stamina, physicality. All of those things came into the game, and his deft touch and his ability to find players and see things that other people couldn't see were of less importance. And Klopp has been videoed saying, no matter even if you had the world's greatest number 10, that person is not as good as a counter press or a gegenpress, as they call it. And at that point, that really says it all, because that's what Klopp does, and that's what Guardiola does. They play this press game, and they win the ball back as quickly as possible. And if you do that, you don't actually need a number 10. Now, I suspect that what we're now, Guardiola's team are doing pretty well now, and Brendan Rodgers' team are doing well. I suspect that the sort of counter press is being slightly changed, because everything changes. And certainly we've seen with Emile Smith Rowe that there is still a role for somebody that can play in between the lines. But he has to also go back and help out in midfield and defence. But unfortunately, Ozil just wasn't happy to do that. Why else would Real Madrid have been happy to sell him on? So they saw the writing on the wall. Unfortunately, Arsenal didn't. I think we're all aware, or I was certainly aware, that whenever we played games that he didn't fancy, if we played Newcastle up in the northeast in the cold weather, he always got a bad back or something was wrong. And it was year after year. And I thought, not Newcastle again, you know. And from what I hear, Wenger allowed him those kind of things. He pampered him a bit. That's going to be disastrous inside the dressing room. I mean, if I spotted it, you can bet the sort of players spotted it. And I think the dressing room's been tricky for a long time. And I've often felt sorry for Arteta, that he's quite a young guy. He's only 5 or 6 years older than some of our senior players. And they are the players who've been, from what we understand, like Luiz and Willian, who have been causing ructions, and no doubt Ozil. And so really, the sooner we get to the end of this season and we clear out some of the old timers, especially the ones that are causing all kinds of trouble, and then he can have a clear run. because he's got to keep the dressing room on board. So I doubt if he's doing a George Graham or a Theo Foley. I doubt if he's grabbing them by the throat. But I mean, back in the day, managers would call players out. I think now you can't do it because these guys are multi-millionaires, and you've got to tread carefully, you know. And I don't think your line managers, your Stan Kroenkes would be happy if you were being done for assault, you know. So well, he was lazy, so I grabbed him, you know.
Terry, Mesut Ozil, Arsenal legend? No, not for you, or yes?
Blew it. I think the man blew it. I think he was lined up to be Arsenal legend. But unfortunately, if you compare him to somebody who played in a similar position, Dennis Bergkamp, a kind of a number 10 come striker. I mean, Dennis never, ever gave up a lost cause. He fought hard for us. You're going back through all the years that we've had great players, back to one of my favourites, George Armstrong. If George lost the ball, he was a winger. He'd run back until he got the ball back. You'd never see Ozil doing that. He'd just give up, you know. And unfortunately, he became a World Cup winner. He was lauded in Germany. Then the Germans didn't like him, but he was lauded back home in his ancestors' place of Turkey, which is fantastic. And he married a girl from there, and obviously he's going to go over there and finish his career there. But really, the second half of his career, after he got the second deal, I spotted his game going off virtually straight away. And again, I was watching him because, you know, you're standing on the terraces. A friend of mine used to say, under Wenger in the final years, you saw the same game every time Arsenal played. And he was quite right. A friend of mine's been going to watch Arsenal since the 50s. He twigged it for me. He said, if you go and watch Arsenal now, and he's season ticket holder, he says, under Wenger, it's always the same game. He never changes tactics. It's the same game, you know. So while I was watching the same game week in and week out, I thought I'll watch Ozil. And for the 2.5, 3 months before he signed the second contract, wonderful, all over the shop, running, face blood red, you know, really giving it the lot, you know. And then as his body slowed down, and then he got this massive money, but he got the second deal. Then I think it starts psychologically. You kind of relax. You think, I've done it. This is my final big contract of my career. I'm absolutely loaded. I've got more money than I could ever have dreamed of as a little kid in Germany growing up. And then once that starts to happen, it's dangerous. Once you start to slacken, we saw that with Sanchez, Alexis Sanchez. Once you start to slacken, you can't pull it back. And when he went off to Man United, he couldn't pull it back either. And I think with Ozil, once it had got away from him and he'd lost that initial drive, and it's a mental thing as much as a physical thing, he couldn't get it back. And then he was getting pulled by, because he was so famous and he'd done lots of charitable things. It's worth saying in his defense, he has contributed to many charities. He was worried about the plight of the Uyghur Muslims out in China, and he actually mentioned that a few times. And that's fine, absolutely. It's always risky mixing politics with any sport,
and religion as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember back when David O'Leary played for us, and there was some query about something. I won't say too much about it, but basically, some political issue had gone on at the time in terms of Ireland. And we, on the morning of a match, we had to Arsenal put out that he wasn't going to be playing that day. And then luckily the threat went away, and he carried on his career. So I think it's always very risky to start involving politics or your religious background and your sport. Just play the sport, enjoy the sport. And the moment you start to step over that, you're stepping into dangerous territory. So good luck to him. He had the first period of his time with us was wonderful in flashes. As you say, he didn't dominate a whole. He was fantastic, and I remember seeing a few times where he'd spot a pass, and people would say on the TV, nobody else in the English Premier League could have spotted that pass, you know. But no, he isn't a legend, and I can't see a statue being done for him.
Yeah. So just going back, you know, in regards to the players we have now who are, for me, are on inflated amounts of money. I'm going to use the Aubameyang example there, but blinding. Last two
Yeah.
seasons, top scorer for Arsenal. He kind of delays announcing whether he's going to sign the team or not, and he does actually say that he was approached, I think, by various clubs, and Arteta managed to get him to sign the contract. Do you think in modern day football there's probably a case where you can actually factor in a clause in the contract? Listen, although we've given you like 3 years, if you start to go down your performance, you're not scoring the goals, maybe we can retract or take some money back from you as
Well,
not so much punishment, but I don't know.
yeah, I do. I mean, we've got this new CEO coming in. I forget his first name, but his surname is
Garlic.
unforgettable. Garlic. Don't show him to Emery. But
Gary.
you know, but yeah, I personally think that the players, the whole of football, the way football is set up financially, is very, what we call in the Cockney world, very iffy. There's something wrong with the kind of money that is. I'm not going to say too much on this, but there seems to be an awful lot of money flashing around with the elite players and the elite owners. And where there's big money, where there's really big money, it's risky. A friend of mine who was a conga and drummer player, he actually lives in the block opposite Arsenal, and he was in a couple of fairly famous rock bands. He worked with Curiosity Killed the Cat and Terence Trent D'Arby, and he said to me, once you start signing record contracts and you're up with the really big boys, the guys who own the record companies and are earning millions, he said, Terry, it's a whole different ball game. And he said, you've got to watch yourself very carefully because you're dealing with people with massive power. And I got a feeling that there's something right at the heart of soccer now where these guys are being paid far too much. Not only that, the transfer fee, £72 million for Pepe, is absolute madness. And then they're playing, the players are being paid a king's ransom. I didn't see him play, but there was a guy in the middle 60s, early 60s called George Easton, who took Newcastle to court, Newcastle United to court, because at the time they had a ceiling on wages. And George Easton won the court case and they lifted the sort of wage ceiling, and then he signed for Arsenal. Well, that's fine, absolutely fine. But now we've gone to the point where some of these elite players, the amount they're being paid is impinging on their sort of quality of football, and there's something wrong. Somebody put on Twitter, it's interesting that I think it was Plato or Socrates said that. That the lowest, or the sort of lowest person's wages, the highest wages that anybody should earn in a society like that should be no more than 5 times. So say the lowest wages might be 20,000, then the highest wages should be no more than 5, which would be 100,000. Or even if you make that 10 times and make it 200,000, you're still being paid unbelievable amounts of money. And these guys are, I think, 40,000 a week or something. Emile Smith Rowe is on, and we're saying he's not paid remotely as high as some of these guys. Now, when there's that amount of money slushing around inside the game, it's not good, because the game should be self-financing. And I'm sorry if to divulge about the way sport is financed in Ireland, and there's all kinds of issues about that. But I know that the players play for the joy of playing. They definitely get expenses and so on. And if they win the All Ireland, they get an all expenses paid holiday to Florida or somewhere, and their families. But the sort of money is circulating in the game, so that every little village you drive around the south of Ireland, every little village will have a GAA ground, sometimes artificial turf, mostly normal turf, but they'll have floodlights, they'll have changing rooms, and it's trying to make sure that the grassroots of the game is still healthy. And I think that's good. And I worry now that there's so much money at the elite level that is not filtering down. And there'll be players in the lower
Absolutely.
leagues who are not earning remotely what these players are earning. And it's out of kilter. It doesn't match up. When I look at it, it's wrong. Now, it's not going to change immediately, but it's by no accident that we've got multi-billionaires like Kroenke coming in, because they can smell big money.
Hmm.
Now, I don't think that's good for the game, either in Britain or in Europe or anywhere. You've got to somehow get it sensible. I mean, I'll make people laugh now, but this is true. When I was a little fella going to schools in Highbury, at half term, we used to go. My mate said to me, "Oh, it's half term. Let's go up and see the Arsenal players put in their checks. They used to get paid by check in those days. No internet banking. So we'd stand on the corner at Finsbury Park, and there's a Barclays Bank there. And the players used to come up around about midday, maybe 1 in the afternoon, after training on a Friday, because there was no London Colney in those days, I suppose. And they'd go past us and they'd sign autographs, and they'd go into the bank, put their checks in, and then they'd come out, sign more autographs, and there was a Wimpy bar, which was like a McDonald's of those days, you know. Very like a McDonald's, except they actually gave you a plate and a knife and fork, and 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 the players used to go in there, and it was glass partitioned on the front, and we'd stand out there and look at them. I mean, it must have really annoyed them, you know. But you'd have your George Graham, who later became our famous manager, Frank McClintock, and all our famous players were in there having a Wimpy and a cup of tea, you know, and some chips, you know, and they all lived in Winchmore Hill, which is a very posh area, and so on. So they were earning, but also they had a thing called a testimonial. So towards the end of their career, they'd have a special match, and it might feature Arsenal versus Celtic or some interesting game to play, or a European team, and they'd get all the sort of gate receipts. And that way, if players retired at 30 or 32, they'd have an input of money to tide them over until they maybe retrained or something. Well, now we've gone to the opposite, where these guys will never have to work again. And I just worry that we've lost it now. You know, people are working when the pandemic is over and people go back to working, or they're furloughed now. Money's hard to come by, and you look forward to watching your team play, and you pay your money, and you're in a drafty stadium, albeit a brand new stadium. It's pretty cold most of the year. There's nowhere to sit if you go out during half time or after the match. Unless you're at club level, there isn't anywhere to sit around, and you have to stand there with a cup of tea or a cold pint, you know, or a pie that you've paid an inordinate sum for. Absolutely crazy. And I don't know. If you've got a business run on those lines, it's not going to continue. There's a realignment is needed between what the elite players are paid and what the average fan is having to pay to go in and see his or her favourite team.
Tell, didn't English football almost go bust in the 80s? I'm sure it
That
was on the
rings a
verge
bell.
of going bust, and I think maybe that's what needs to happen for I mean, yeah, to have like a massive reboot.
Well, clubs did go bust. Absolutely, clubs did go
Mm.
bust and had to be pulled out of it. And then you had the big takeovers. Wimbledon, for instance, who
That's
won the
right.
FA
Yeah.
Cup, famous one. They then got bought out by a consortium, and horrendously, the consortium said, "Do you know what? There's a new town up in the South Midlands called Milton Keynes, and we're going to relocate because we've got a whole load of people living there that haven't got a football team." So they relocated, and the local Wimbledon supporters said, "Well, hang on a second, we can't be going off to Milton Keynes every." And they started organising coaches. I think they were free. I'm not sure. And the supporters did exactly the right thing. They said, "No, we're going to start Wimbledon again." And because Wimbledon is towards the end of the alphabet, they were always annoyed that they were in a list of clubs. They were near the end, so they renamed the new club AFC Wimbledon. They started a new club. I remember going to see Arsenal play down there, and I remember buying their socks because they were very like the County Clare socks. And I thought, oh, I'll buy these, sort of blue with a yellow top. And I've followed them since, and they've done very, very well. They're back in the league, and also, more importantly, the FA allowed Wimbledon, or AFC Wimbledon, to have the trophy list that Wimbledon had won, because they'd won the FA Cup and they'd won some of the leagues coming up through the leagues. They transferred the trophy list from, or if you like, the sort of roll of honour, from Milton Keynes Dons to AFC Wimbledon. So they've got back their sort of club, you know, and they are run as the AFC actually doesn't stand for Athletic Football Club. It stands for a fans club. So they're run by the fans. And there are a few examples. Not far from Arsenal is Clapton Community Football Club, CCFC. And they are run by the fans and for the fans. So maybe at some point, I know James, last time we spoke, was very worried about the fact that we're almost certainly going to go into a European league and step outside of the EPL, and matches will be played in Stan Kroenke's backyard and so on. And I can see why James was very worried about that, because I don't want football to lose its roots with the local people. Not necessarily working class. I don't have to be working class to be a local person. I'm just saying it needs to keep the people on board. You know, I don't want to see it as a sport that doesn't maintain its links with the regular person, really. Rich or poor.
There was another segment I actually forgot to talk about. I know I received a lot of comments over the last few days in regards to Squadron Mustafi and his comments that he made once Mesut Ozil, his mate, had left, and it's annoyed a lot of people, where he's actually said that he's bid farewell to Mesut Ozil as an unselfish player, and we didn't literally stick by him, and it annoyed me a little bit. It really annoyed me, because I'm thinking, we've got to make sure that our players are media savvy. They don't go to their social accounts and like tweet out anything under the sun. Where are the consequences? The moment he actually said that he didn't want to have a contract extension, for me, he should never have played for Arsenal again. Just put him on the bench, let him play in the under-23s. But, you know, worse still, he's tweeting out that. Where is the recourse? Where's what's going on at Arsenal, LTEL? Media savvy players. Come on, Arsenal.
I don't understand why. I know Arsenal do get players into a room and talk to them about how they approach the sort of media and so on. I was infuriated by that. I was thinking, if I did something like that in my job and criticised my school, and somebody, you know, I would expect the head and the chair of governors to be pulling me in and either giving me a written warning or saying maybe you should go somewhere else. You know, that was unforgivable. I'll tell you what's also unforgivable on a similar line, and I read this recently, because Ozil had to turn up at training. Obviously, he's contracted to turn up even if Arsenal don't use him. So of course, I would rather have said to him, go home, and I'd rather not see you again if I was his manager. But we can't do that. He has to be allowed to come to training. But apparently what he did, and it used to wind up, especially the sort of young players, is he was obviously a very skillful player. But what he'd do is, when he'd do when he'd lay a pass, he'd do a little spin. He'd do a lot, like he'd flick the ball and do a spin, and every ball was spun. It outside of the foot, inside of the foot, and he'd do a little bit of a twirl, and he'd do whatever, as if to say, "Look at me." Now, he invented, people might have forgotten, I'd have invented it by accident, but he scored a goal against Chelsea about 3 years ago, where the ball came to him and he hit it into the ground, and then it went over the goalie, Now,
Yeah.
I know the guy's skillful, and he'll still be skillful when he's 70. Puskás was still as skillful as he was, the Hungarian player who tore England apart back in the, I think it was the late 50s. He was still playing beach football and could put the ball on what you used to call a sixpence. You don't lose your skill. Of course you don't. Pace, yes. Stamina, yes. But Ozil should not be doing that. That's naughty. That's just being flash and saying, if you had me, that's a way of saying physically, if I was in your team, can you imagine what I'd be doing?
Yeah.
No, that's not old. That's not professional. Why don't these people? I've always worked professionally in whatever job I've done. Be professional about this and don't make things worse for your bosses. Your
But
bosses are
Terry,
paying
but
your wage.
Terry, that is the culture at Arsenal. That is the bad culture that's been
Yeah,
bred at Arsenal. That these players, they can do whatever they want without any recourse at all. That is the culture at Arsenal. You've got
yeah.
Xhaka who did what he did. I thought he's never going to play for Arsenal again, and he's still playing for Arsenal. You've got Guendouzi, all those players there. That is the culture at Arsenal. They can do whatever they want, Tel.
That's what's.
Disgusting.
I'd like to say something about Xhaka actually, because I've
Yeah.
noticed, if you think about it, one of the things we know Arteta is good at, we're still to find out if he's a top manager, but I think he's heading in the right direction. But the one thing that everybody said when he worked at Man City was he is a wonderful coach. And he will take players individually, like Sterling, who didn't start well at Man City when he first went there. And Arteta worked with him intensively and improved on how he receives the ball, where he receives the ball, how he moved, how he shoots, and so on. And I think Arteta has had to decide with Xhaka, do I back him or sack him? And I think, from what everybody tells me, he's a big personality in the dressing room. And what Arteta's done is decide, I'm going to work with him. I'm not going to call him out because that obviously upset Xhaka, but he's probably called him out personally and said what you did is un-Arsenal like. But I think he's also said, if you're going to stay, we're going to iron out one of your biggest problems. And you remember I've often compared him to Petit and saying he's like a half a Petit. He's got a sweet left foot. He can play the ball 40 yards beautifully, curl it into people's pathways, but he can't tackle. And if you notice, all the best tackling stats we've got over the last 2 or 3 games have been Xhaka. He made 10 successful tackles in our most recent game. And I think Arteta has worked with him on it. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes he approaches a player and he gets it inside out, back to front, and he ends up on his backside with his feet in the air. But I do think Arteta's worked with him and shown him how to tackle. And he's now worth his place in the team. He looked very good alongside Partey. I think he's obviously realised that Partey is a top player, maybe even a world-class player. And it's good for him to work alongside a top class player, and hopefully, having seen them in the last game, they look like a very good pivot that Arsenal can play off. We still need a player in front, but at the moment it's Emile Smith-Rowe. But I think we are going to buy either Buendia or maybe Awar or somebody in there to take the burden off of Emile Smith-Rowe. It's too much on a young player.
Yeah. I've got Elto with me, guys. Make sure you subscribe to Cannon for TV. We've just been just talking about a couple of new segments, as well as Mesut Ozil, who's now left these pastures and gone on to new pastures over Fenerbahce. So there, it was painless for me, anyway, at least. Caleb Mumba says, "How are you, my friend, and all Gunners out there? Are we getting Patson Daka?" Caleb, I've done more than 4 videos in regards to Patson Daka. So go on the platform. You'll see my thoughts in regards to this player. Whether Arsenal sign him or not is that on my hands. I don't have a hotline to Edu or Mikel Arteta. Bronze Dosser says, add Wilshere to the list. Yeah. He signed for Bournemouth, hasn't he?
Bournemouth. Yeah.
Bournemouth.
Well, I'm glad to see him back playing,
Still only 28, 27, 28, 29?
Wow. Yeah.
My goodness.
But ankles, if you start getting ankle trouble in football, you are in trouble. Knees, they can seem to do wonders with nowadays, but yeah.
Yeah, but like I think we spoke before. I think his physiology is similar to Malcolm McDonald's. The bandy legs, quite vulnerable to like kicks and injuries. And what's wrong? Tell me.
You just reminded me of a story.
Go on,
You just reminded me of a story. Okay, we signed Malcolm McDonald. He was called Superman,
oh
and we
dear.
signed him from Newcastle United back in the day, and he was scoring pretty freely. And about 6 or 7 weeks into the season, maybe what would it have been, about early October, something like that. We played Newcastle at home at Arsenal, and of course they were still smarting from losing Supermac, and I was in the clock end, and there were quite a few of the Newcastle supporters around me. And of course, Malcolm McDonald did have these bandy legs. His left leg, especially, was really bandy. And these guys around me, these Newcastle Geordies, full of humour, lovely people. Won't have a word said against the Geordies. They're lovely people, you know. And they'd obviously heard criticism of him while he played for them. And so they decided to turn the criticism they'd heard about him onto him, because he was wearing the red and white of Arsenal. And he trotted onto the pitch, and he had the obvious bandy legs. And all the Newcastle supporters around me said, "Have you left your horse outside?" And what tickled me is, I used to think that players couldn't hear what was being said, but I used to be friendly. I think I've told people before, with a young fella that played for Arsenal, Brian McDermott, and I knew Brian's mum and dad well. And I did ask them, do players hear it? And they said the previous week we'd been playing Tottenham in a big match, in an evening match. So the atmosphere is electric, if you like, in the evening, not just electric lights, but the whole thing is electric. It's like a drama, isn't it? All the lights are on, and the green grass, and the players are out, and the crowds roar. And in spite of that roar in a local derby, Brian could still hear people shouting at him, "We hope you." This isn't the
Really?
Arsenal players. "We hope you break your leg," and stuff like that. And Brian's mum, this is her son, and she was saying to me, she was horrified by people
Yeah.
wanting her son's leg broken, as any mum would, for crying out loud. The dad wasn't so worried, because the dad was an ex-boxer, so he could have probably floored anybody that in earshot, you know. But players do hear it. So when Malcolm came on, yeah, they did give him a bit of jip about his bandy. I don't know whether that was due to rickets as a child, or just happened to be the sort of way he was, you know.
Terry. Santiago says, good evening, Alex and Eltel. The happy-go-lucky people are seen more successful because their attitude allows them to notice opportunities and gives them the confidence to engage with the world in a positive way. Santiago, thank you very much for those kind words of yours. Marcelino del Roma, who's in Italy, I remember. Theo Walcott said Van Persie was better than Thierry Henry, which is totally wrong. I think Walcott needs to go and get Specsavers.
Walcott did say that. I saw that. Yeah, man. And the thing is, while Walcott was with us, Van Persie was nearly always injured. It was only in the last season and a half that he played consistently.
That's a good point, actually. Ashidi says, hey up, power to the Gooners.
Hey.
Apparently, Socrates has had his contract terminated. Yeah, we spoke about it. That was one of the evening segments there. Brian Nielsen, good evening, my friend. Elto and Alex and everyone else, good evening.
Oh, yeah.
McDonald, that's a funny one. Good evening, Alex, and good evening to you. Ozil, Arsenal legend. Nah, never was that good, that consistent. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe the attitude as well. Didn't turn up for the Europa League final a couple of years ago. Santiago says, in my humble opinion, it was Cazorla and Sanchez that made number 10 look good. Once they departed, the stats showed that what he was made of. That was the other argument as well, Eltel. If only he had quality players around him, I was thinking, nah. I'm sorry, I'm not falling for that. I'm not falling for that.
Yeah.
He's a conundrum. His stats are good, but every time I watched him play, he looked uninspired and straight up lazy, Terry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, people's body shape and body, stuff tells you the whole thing. I never forget the one I remember mostly was Kieran Tierney playing against what was his name, Adama Traore,
Oh,
and I think Tierney had only joined us recently before, and Traore beat him all ends up, and I could see Tierney's face, thinking, what am I facing here? Because he'd only played a few games in the EPL, So yeah. But I mean, funny enough, I think Klopp is trying to buy Traore,
is
because
he
yeah, and I mean, on his day, he is unstoppable and
unplayable? Yeah,
unplayable. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the before and after photographs, but they've got a photograph of him when he was about 17 or 18, and he's a thin guy. And then they've got the one a few years later, and the guy has bulked up into some monster,
beast.
And just given a stretch of 10 yards, he can go past anybody because his
Mm,
acceleration is phenomenal. And his crossing has improved a great deal. And the way teams set up against him is to have more than one person trying to stop him, and that exactly with the same with sort of Pepe. Pepe can
mm,
probably beat anybody, any one person, but teams just double up on him, and then he's
yeah,
never going to beat the second one. So that's the way you set up against Adama Traore. But he's
mm,
one of my favourite players currently.
yeah. Monty, my second moderator says for the evening says a hi, Alex Eltel and the Canon 42 family. He says
Hey,
smash the thumbs up and subscribe if you're new here. And yes, there are a lot of money. There is a lot of money in football, but it's a balloon and it will burst someday. And that's what I think it might need that to happen for football to go bust, to have like a real serious reboot. Because
yeah,
the money
yeah.
can get filtered down to the grassroots level. The money's
They
stuck at
just
the top.
the sort of product isn't right yet. I mean, I went to see Pele play once when I was in New York back in 1976, and it was a thrill to, even though it was the end of his career, to go to Yankee Stadium and see him play for New York Cosmos. But they give
Mm,
you loads of things that are happening on the pitch before the game and after the game, and they just make it feel like a proper experience. You can feel that you're being entertained as well as part of a football match, and you're being looked after, you know.
mm,
Uh, uh, but with a lot of soccer now, you're in a drafty cold stadium, and you can't get home. So Arsenal, when they first moved in, people might not know this. When we first moved into the new stadium, Arsenal were very worried that the tube station would be overloaded with people all leaving at the same time. Doesn't happen so much on the way in because some people go in early. So in order, and they had to sort of agree with Islington Council that they would put measures in place so that people could stay at the stadium for a while. So what they used to do is down by the was it the West Stand? They used to where you buy your drinks, and the sort of concourse area, it's called, isn't it? They used to have a little mini stage there, and every match they'd have a different ex-player get up on the stage and talk about
mm.
their time at Arsenal. John Radford did it. Charlie George did it. Brendan Batson did it. I shook hands with Brendan Batson. He came
Oh,
down. And I said,
wicked.
"Thank you for all the good days. Nice guy." And it was good fun. And you'd buy yourself a cup of coffee or a pint or and a pie, and then you'd
Mm.
stand there and listen to them, and they'd take questions and so on. But they only did that for a year or two. Now, why don't they do that? It's not going to cost them a lot, but just make it something so that people can enjoy the Arsenal experience. I really don't know why that. Maybe the players didn't like doing it. They did tend to. You've tended to feel they were a little bit accessible because people could jump up on stage with them. But I don't see any reason why they can't do that, and put a few benches out or something where if you buy a pint, you can sit down and have your pint and your pie, and listen to an ex-Arsenal player talking about things, that they could do loads of things like that they just don't do. And then you have the nuisance. This is if anybody who's not in London and doesn't go and see the games, anyone who's abroad, they do at the end of the game show you a few highlights for about 5 minutes. And that's great. And I always stay around and watch the highlights. And then they boot you out. So, I would say to anybody when the grounds are open again, when I was in the West End, and I was in the upper tier, the nice part of it is you're near where the TV cameras are, and you're near where all the commentators are. So after the match, I used to go down there, and you could meet Petit because he'd be commentating for Canal Plus. And I never spoke to him, just waved to him. But other people with their kids would get him to sign autographs. And you get quite a few well-known ex-players. England managers would be there commentating on maybe BBC 5 Live. And you'd see them and you could chat to them and so on. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing they could be doing to make it a proper experience. Instead, all they want is they want your money. They charge you an enormous amount for a simple pie and a pint, or pie and a coffee, and then you're left standing in a drafty corridor.
They want you out. That's what it is, isn't it? Yeah.
You know.
Let me go back in live chat just for the last one before I wrap up this one. Mark Webber, good evening. I hope you are well. Xhaka slowing the game down. Cedric is decent replacement for right back, but I've got to say, Cedric, he also did a foul throw as well. I was thinking, Cedric, God, what is it contagious or what?
Yeah, I like what Mark is saying about Xhaka, because it really annoys me the way he slows the game down. And I would almost forbid him, unless he was really being pressed hard, to not pass the ball backwards. It drives me nuts. And thank God Emile Smith-Rowe only does that if he has to. He does it occasionally, but his first thought is vertical. Get the ball going towards the goal, not even diagonal. He goes for goal all the time. Xhaka does this constant shimmy. I suppose he's protecting the fact that he's very one-paced, and there was a few times, by the way, talking about Xhaka, where he could have played the ball with his weaker foot to Emile Smith-Rowe. But he didn't. He thought, no, I can't trust my right foot, and then he played the ball back. Well, I'm sorry, even me as a footballer, when I played, I made sure my weaker foot was good enough to play a 20-yard pass, and Xhaka won't do that. So it really annoyed, because we didn't have him as a young player. But I would think, hopefully, Mertesacker is doing this, and he's making sure that players are good with both feet. We're not saying that you're going to you're going to dribble with your weaker foot. That was a skill beyond me, but I could take corners with it, and it was reliable. By the way, it's worth mentioning, isn't Saka a reliable corner taker? What a wonderful taker of corners. He plays the ball, he puts his hand up, and then he plays the ball exactly into that 6-yard box, and he does it without fail. How many times have we seen players that can't get past the first defender? So
can he take free kicks as well? Because I'm looking at Willian. I was thinking Willian cannot beat or get the ball over the wall. Can he take out free kicks as well? Tell Saka.
Well, I've got to be honest. I mean, William, I did say in a comment a while ago, in the last match, William laughed once. Smiler laughed. And it was Xhaka that went past him, and he had a few dribbles coming out of his nose, and Xhaka wiped them. And it's the only time I've seen William laugh. It wasn't very long. He kind of laughed for about half a second and then went sad again, But I'm getting sick of that guy. I mean, he's been a bad buy. We've had, this might be a segment we're doing at some point. We've had Runarsson come in, and that looks like a bad buy. We've had Willian come in. That looks like a bad buy. Now, I'm not going to have a go at Arteta in terms of Runarsson, because he did say he was advised by his goalkeeping staff, i.e. Inaki Kana, who only likes goalkeepers that are 6 foot or less. You know, he won't have any tall goalkeepers there. We'll have none of that. Emilio Martinez, 6'4", get him out. What was that other guy, Matt Macy? Get him out.
Yeah,
He's too
yeah,
tall, you know.
yeah.
Um,
Ridiculous.
but Willian looks. Do you know what? If I'd have made that mistake, I'd have gone to my boss and say, "I got it wrong. I got it wrong." I think behind that, if people remember, I filed these things away. He was at the time Arsenal were negotiating with Aubameyang, and I think one of his demands was that we sign a playmaker, somebody that could set the goals up for him. And I think we panicked and rushed out, got William because he was a free, then paid him a king's ransom. And William doesn't play well as a number 10, and he's a winger, but he's lost that bit of pace, and I think his days are numbered. And I think Arteta's going to have to go cap in glove, as the old phrase is, to Stanley Kroenke and say, "I made an error." And maybe they could use him as a make weight to sign Buendia or something, you know.
Yeah. Right, let me go into life just for the last time because I want to wrap this one up very, very soon. Marcolino says we need Alexis Sanchez back. Well, not me. No. I know what you mean. Yeah, but yet no.
I would
Corey
say,
Young says, "Go on, tell quick." Yep.
I would say to that guy, they when they were negotiating with Sanchez and trying to keep him at Arsenal, they did put Arsenal produced a massive banner of Alexis with his two dogs, and there was some phrase like me and my good old boys or something, or me and my dogs or something, you know. And it was a massive banner, and they were doing everything. I could see the thought pattern. If we make him feel at home and he loves his dogs, and of course he didn't. He was only interested in the sort of money at the end of the day.
Colin Young, welcome. He says, "Hey, Alex and Eltel, how are you doing, fellas? I'm fine, thank you. I almost missed the Mexit.
That's a good one. Brilliant.
It was quite painless for me, you know. I did actually get to mention his name, yeah, Mesut Ozil, painless, but yeah, welcome back. We're about to end this one, Colin. What else? Santiago says, good show, Alex and Eltel, very good presentation. Thank you very much. Enjoy the stories, much modest and kind way of expressing your options. True gentleman and true goodness. Thank you for that very much, Santiago. Who else do we have? One more before we finish this one. Foul throws. It's heresy. It's contagious. That's what it is.
Well, can I just say something about Cedric? I've noticed that, and I'm sure the fans have, that he crosses the ball well, excellently, brilliantly. Yeah. Now, what he does, if you watch him, he prepares to cross the ball and he looks at how close the opponent is to him so that he doesn't just slam the ball into the opponent. And I've often wondered, if you've got a player like that, and I'm sure that was one of the reasons Arsenal signed him, because he's really good at that, why doesn't somebody, the fullback that he's in there to replace, who can't cross the ball because he whacks it, he either goes backwards or plays it into the opponent's sort of legs or something? Why doesn't Bellerin, let's call him, why doesn't Bellerin watch what Cedric does and learn from it? It's obvious when you watch it how Cedric makes space. Why doesn't Bellerin learn from it? I don't get that.
Yeah, frustrating. But I'll have Cedric any day over Bellerin. What else do we have here?
Got a bit of an old-fashioned haircut, though. I
suppose bad buy or panic buy, same but different. 100% agree. Great people. That's Terry. And one more, Alex and Terry. Totally agree on the Willian. What a waste of money. Out of interest, is the buyers injured or have I missed something? And is he returning to Madrid? I don't know, Terry. Have you got any information on
No, he's been rested, but he's going back there at the end of the season. So that's where his heart is. So if listen, we are a big club, and if these players think, well, there's another club I'd say go. You won't
Yeah,
get the best out of a player who's just marking time, And if Ceballos, who's fine, but he's not a wonderful player, if he wants to go back to Madrid, fine, because he won't be getting many games there.
yeah,
That's for
yeah.
he is limited. I like him, and he was very good up at West Brom. He played a very good game in snow. Maybe he's like Bambi on ice.
Oh dear, guys! Listen, the show has come to an end. Ozil anthology. My moderator for the evening says, "Thank you, Alex and Eltel, for a great show, and thank you, Gunas, for spending your time here." I will not be back tomorrow. I've got some training I need to be doing, so I won't be back in time. I'll be back on Friday. Friday is the Easy Talk. That's the next
Hey,
available time. You're going to be seeing Eltel. Eltel will be back again. Also with Daniel from Arsenal Costa Rica and Ralph from Arsenal Paraguay. So it's going to be a very Latin stroke English Irish easy talk. But guys, make sure you join us. Go on, Tel.
I'll definitely get the old Spanish guitar out then and do a couple of rumbas or cha-chas,
You got to do that, Tel. I'm serious. Take
I
out the
will.
guitar. I'm serious, man. And I've got a guitar somewhere in the house as well. So I'll bring out mine as well, Tel.
Wahila Guantanamera.
Yay! Oh, fun and laughter over here. So, guys, those of you who watch it for the first time, make sure it's not the last time. You've got to subscribe. I want you to be part of the Canon 4 TV community over here. We're growing. I'm hoping we'll reach 11,000 before January is through. But
Wow.
yeah. I might get my sombrero out. It's gonna have like a Latin American feel.
Castanets.
Oh my goodness. Terry, listen, thanks for coming on the show. Oh, dearie me. Yeah, Terry will be back on Friday, and I too will be back on Friday as well. Terry! I'm trying to do the outro. Guys. Terry, I'm trying to do the outro. Oh,
I'm not wearing Speedos for nobody.
guys. Oh, dearie me. All right, pull yourself together, Alex. Guys, I'll see you. Terry! Guys, guys, I will see you on Friday, 7:30 p.m. for the Easy Talk. Okay, make sure you subscribe, please. And if you've been wondering what you've been watching Canon for the channel for Arsenal fans all over this world.